You've heard me talk about the Caskey Conference. That is that conference at the New Orleans Seminary that they do every year. It's kind of geared towards, pastors and church leaders and their spouses, and that's kind of like their target audience. But it's a time of refreshment and rejuvenation for church leaders, just to kind of refresh them a little bit. And I told you we go to that every year now because that's the conference. If you remember, I talk about it from time to time because it's such a part of my story. That's the conference when we went to it the first year, 3 years ago, where I finally sensed and submitted to the call to become a pastor. Like that's where that happened. So we go to that every year now. And this past year, you'll maybe remember, we went in April, and I talked about it a little bit when we got back that following Sunday. But we went to it this past April, and one of the speakers at that event, he got up and he was talking about his experiences growing up in church, listening to Mother's Day sermons and Father's Day sermons year after year after year. And he said it was the most incredible thing. He realized after a while, he's like, it's crazy how every Mother's Day, a pastor will get up to the pulpit and he'll be like, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, but he'll be like, you mothers are so beautiful. You're so important. The work you do is so great. Your children need you, and, God bless you, and all this, and just really trying to encourage them and build them up. And again, I love that. I did that. But he says, but then that same pastor will come up to that same pulpit on Father's Day and be like, you bunch of heathens. You're not doing your jobs. You're not leading your family. You're not doing the things you're supposed to be doing. How dare you? How dare you? And just the complete difference in tone. On Mother's Day, it's so just positive and uplifting and encouraging. And on Father's Day, it's like, yeah, I'm going to hit you with a hammer. And just this dichotomy. And as a pastor sitting here listening to this guy, that hit me right in the heart. That hit me right in the feels. I felt bad. Because I'm like, man, I got to change my whole Father's Day sermon now. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I was going to bring a hammer and everything. So, kidding, of course. My point is, I have bad news for you. If you came to church today hoping to be shamed and beat down and hit over the head, you came to the wrong place. I just want to put that out there right now. You came to the wrong place. On the contrary, what I'm here to talk to you about today is some of the greatest unsung heroes of our day, some of the greatest unsung heroes of our times, those being good, honest, biblical-minded, godly dads. That's what I want to talk about. And I say unsung heroes because, man, we are surrounded by a culture that doesn't like to lift up men very much. Just doesn't want to do it. We're much more fun when we're the butt of the joke, right? The culture doesn't want to talk about the virtues of manhood. The culture doesn't want to talk about the virtues of an assertive man who knows his value and who knows what he's for and will stand up for it. That kind of thing makes people very uncomfortable today. That kind of thing makes people very uncomfortable because they immediately run the wrong way with what the implications of that are. So I want to offer some encouragement this morning to the dads in the room. That's what we're going to do today. I want to offer you some encouragement from the life of a man, by the way, a man that we talked about last week a little bit, who was a great father. He's a great model for fatherhood, but his role, even in that, his role as a father gets overshadowed a lot. We don't talk about him in his fatherhood as much because he gets overshadowed by other things he's more famous for, like suffering. You think Job, you think suffering. You don't think great dad. You think Job, you think problem of evil. Why do bad things happen and all this stuff? That's what we associate with Job, which is unfortunate because he was so much more than just a man who suffered. He was also a dad. He was a great dad. And so I want to talk about him a little bit this morning. If you'll flip with me to the book of Job, chapter 1, I've titled this sermon, A Father's Faithfulness. A father's faithfulness. And I want to encourage you with 3 traits of a godly father that we see in just the first 5 verses of this text. Just the first, we don't even get to the suffering today. Just the first 5 verses, we see 3 traits of something that makes a great dad, something that makes a great father. And so let's go ahead and dive in. Let's read this together. Job chapter 1, verse 1 starts. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people in the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them. And he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. Y'all, there's a lot to unpack just in those 5 verses. And that's what we're going to say. My first point of encouragement is, be the kind of man that you would want your daughter to marry, or your son to be. Be the kind of man you would want your daughter to marry, or that you would want your son to be. Because before we even get into Job's children, before we even get to them, or what kind of father he even was, we have to talk about his character. We have to talk about the character of the man. Because even though, yes, this is a Father's Day message, before you can be a great father, you have to be a great man. Got it? And before you can be a great man, you have to be a godly man. There's no breaking that chain. It's got to go in that order. And you can take this to the bank. But your children will learn more by your example than they ever will by your words. They just will. You can speak till your head turns blue. Your face turns blue. You can tell them the same thing 1,000 times, 100,000 times, 1,000,000 times. But if you're living different than what you're telling them, they're going to be more swayed by what they see you doing than what they heard you say. And that's just the fact of the matter. And that's why your character as a man and as a dad is so important, because that's what's going to impact them the most. So if you want to be a great father, you have to start with a godly character. And one of the best questions, if you're going to evaluate your character, to ask yourself is, am I the kind of man I would want my daughter to bring home one day? Am I the kind of man? Am I living the kind of way? Do I have the kind of character that I would want to see in my future son-in-law? Am I the kind of man I would want my daughter to marry? Meaning, let's just spell this out a little bit. If your daughter ends up with somebody exactly like you, and let's face it, a lot of girls do, right? If your daughter ends up with somebody exactly like you, who's going to be treating her the exact same way that you treat your wife, speaking to her the exact same way that you speak to your wife, raising your grandkids the way that you raise your kids, handling his affairs, his personal affairs, his corporate affairs, his business affairs, all that kind of stuff, the same way that you do. The question you need to ask yourself is that a good thing? Is that a good thing for her? Or does that mean I'm going to want to kill him one day? Because let's face it, it could go either way, right? Depending on you. If he's exactly like you in every way, are you going to look at him one day and be like, that's a great guy she ended up with? Or are you going to be like, man, I want to kill that kid. I just want to get him off the earth. He is no good for her. And then one day you realize, wait a minute, he's exactly like me. Whoops. And listen, if you don't have a daughter, now I'm speaking to the dad. That whole thing was to the dads with daughters, because we have a special kind of heart, because our daughters do that to us, and that's all I have. That's all I know. So that question I just asked is me times 3, right? Hopefully. So that's a thought I have to maintain. But if you don't have a daughter, you've got 2 options. Use your imagination. What if you did? Or just flip it up a little bit. Am I the kind of man I would want to see my son grow up to be? If he's going to treat his wife the way he saw me treat his mom, is that good? Speaking of prank videos, I saw a prank video recently on the gram the other day where they did just that. This guy set up a camera and started really saying some mean things to his wife right in front of his dad to see what his dad would do. And I don't remember what he was doing, but he was like talking over her, interrupting her, just really being kind of like started getting nasty with her. And his dad's just sitting there getting more and more mad until finally he's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, he goes off on him. But that's the question, right? If your son, how are you going to feel if your son does all the things to his future wife that you've done to your wife, and who conducts himself and does the same types of things that you do? And those are just important questions to ask, especially as we dial in on verse 1. Job's character really shines through in verse 1. It really does. We see three characteristics right there in verse 1. Three characteristics of his character that I would argue, at a minimum, all godly men are going to possess. These are all prerequisites. If you can't say these three things, I don't think you can call yourself godly. And here they are. And you can look right at the text and see them. They're blameless and upright, right? You see that right there. They fear God, and they turn away from evil. Three qualities right there under your character, what kind of man you are. Now, despite whatever thought pops through your head when you hear that phrase, blameless and upright, blameless, right? Please understand, this has nothing to do with like being morally perfect. This text is not saying that he was sinless in any way. In fact, we know otherwise. So this has nothing to do with moral perfection. It has nothing to do with sinlessness, because no one is. Nobody. Let's just start that off right there on the ground floor. Romans 3:23 is very clear about this, right? For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's what it says. And Job was no exception. Job was no exception. We saw this last week. We talked about him last week. Job had a little bit of an attitude problem, if you remember. He had a little bit of an attitude problem, so that by the end of the book of Job, God starts getting on him a little bit. God starts chastising him and saying, like, where were you when I formed the earth? If you're so smart, tell me these things. And God starts really zeroing in on him about that. But at the same time, if you really think about it, and if you've read the book of Job, I know most of you have. I asked you that question last week. If you've ever read through the book of Job, you know that Job endured great suffering. Great suffering. Like some of the worst suffering imaginable. He was systematically attacked in every single way a man could be brought down and humbled. And when Job's friends, with friends like that, when his friends show up to try to comfort him, like, I don't know what their definition of comfort is, but when they show up to try to comfort him, they all assume that his sin is the result of his suffering is the result of some kind of sin. Remember? You've sinned. Confess it. Just confess what it is, and maybe God will stop. They all say this to him. Just confess what the sin is. They all assume he's suffering because of sin, and yet not one of them in the entire book of Job can think of one single sin to accuse him of. You notice that? It's all hypothetical. Like, maybe you did this, maybe you did that. But none of them know anything that they can say against him and say, well, you remember that? You remember that party 2 months ago? You remember that? No, they can't think of a single concrete example. They're just spitballing. They have no idea. They can't think of any specific sin to associate with him. And that's what we mean by blameless. Okay? That's what we mean by blameless. Not that you've never sinned in your life. Not that you're perfect. We know nobody can ever achieve perfection in this world. But your character should be such that if somebody wanted to attack it and take a shot at you and throw you under the bus, they would be hard-pressed to think of a specific charge they can make against you. They would find that so difficult. I can't think of anything specific. That's what your character should be. That's what your reputation should be. To put it another way, we should treat sin like we treat mud. Just because you fall in it doesn't mean you got to roll around in it. Right? You fall, you get up, you dust yourself off, you clean off, you ask for help if you need help getting out the mud, but you get out the mud. That's what that means. Job is not a man who is known for rolling around in mud. That's the point. That's why they couldn't think of it. Which, by the way, goes hand in hand with turning away from evil. Because that's one of the three traits it says there, turning away from evil, which is also, it's important, and it goes along with this whole being blameless and upright, because this goes beyond just not sinning. Yeah, I mean, we already said he's blameless and upright. This goes beyond just not sinning. This implies turning away. Turning away implies that you actually go the extra step. You don't just not sin, you go the extra step to avoid the influence of sin altogether, if at all possible. Like you physically turn away from it. That's what the text literally says. He turned away from sin. Men, please please, and I ask you this with the utmost sincerity and humility and humbleness of heart, but guard your hearts, guard your minds, guard your eyes, guard your ears, guard it all. Be very, very careful with what you choose to look at and what you choose to watch and what you choose to listen to and where you choose to go and who you're going to hang out with when you get there. Guard yourself. Guard yourself. Turn away from evil. The other quality, it says in verse 1, is that he feared God. He feared God. I mean, that's like on the Mount Rushmore of like a trait we all need in our lives. Fear God. And a lot of people are going to immediately ask, because they always do, what does that mean to fear God? What is that saying? Am I quaking in fear? Do I have God phobia? Am I God phobic? Like what does that mean to fear God? Let me put it like this. There's a difference between terror and what I would call healthy fear. There's a big difference between those two things. There is such a thing as healthy fear. And one of the best examples I can think of to illustrate this point, think of a fire. Think of a fire. Seriously, a fire that's burning. I, for one, appreciate a good fire. I love a good fire. When it's safely in my fireplace, right? When it's safely contained within the fireplace and it's providing comfort and warmth and that cute little crackling noise that we all want to drink hot chocolate and read our books near the fireplace when it's winter and it's really cold outside. I love that a lot. Or when it's cooking my food on the grill. Father's Day. A lot of you dads going to be cooking your own Father's Day dinner tonight. Go you. Yeah. Or if it's cooking my food on the grill, right? Great. Yeah. Love fire. I'm not going to put my hand in it though. I don't want it to burn out of control though. I'm not just going to light a fire in the middle of my kitchen. I'm not just going to play with matches as I'm running around my house. I'm not going to do all those kinds of things. Right? I respect it enough to know that there's a certain way you handle it. There are do's and don'ts. Like you have to have a healthy respect for fire and a healthy fear of fire. Right? I'm not terrified of fire. I don't have a phobia of it. But I also don't want to be on the wrong side of it. There's a healthy level of respect there because I know what it is and I know its nature and I know what it can do. That's a healthy fear. That's a healthy fear. We need a healthy fear of the Lord. The problem is a lot of us run around, we don't have any fear of the Lord. That's not just for the men, that's for the world, right? Just no fear at all. Just live my life however I want, deal with it later. Like that is living with no fear. My charge to you men today is love the Lord. Love him. Love him with your whole heart. Appreciate the Lord. Enjoy the Lord. Enjoy his bounty. Enjoy his benefits. Enjoy his love and his mercy and his grace and his tenderness and his patience. Enjoy all those things about them, but always honor him. Always respect him. Always give him his due for what he is and for who he is and for what he deserves. Fear the Lord. Right? That's the point here. Fear him in the right way. And with it, all of the other things I've talked about so far, right? Live an upright life. Be blameless. Turn aside from evil. All of those things. Be the kind of man you would want your daughter to marry. Have that kind of character, or your son to grow up to be. That is the character of a godly father. But what about the quality of his life? What about the quality of his life? The second trait I want to encourage you with is be the kind of man who produces more than he consumes. Yeah. Be the kind of man who produces more than he consumes. I look at Job in verses 2 and 3. And I will admit, some of this is conjecture. Some of this is, but I think we get a pretty good portrait of what his daily routine probably looks like. Some of this is conjecture. But here's a man. He has a wife. He has an estate, pretty big estate. He has 10 kids that he obviously cares about, loves, cares for, leads them in the faith, prays for them, all that kind of thing. 10 kids. In addition, not to mention, he has 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. The text also says he was known as the greatest man in the East. He had this reputation for being like just the greatest man in the East. Now, I ask you, and this is where some of the conjecture comes in, but where would a man get a reputation like that without some serious productivity? How would he have all those things? How would he be known as such a great guy and have all of these things going on? Unless he was a man of responsibility and character and handled his business. How would he have accumulated all of these things and also been known as the greatest man in the East, which is probably hyperbole, but it also reflects the kind of reputation he had. Now, granted, he had some servants. We see he had servants, and they were out there working. But does this sound like a man who lounges around on the sofa all day? Does this sound like a man who just doesn't do anything all day? It doesn't. Not to me. It just doesn't. Now, this is the part of the sermon where, I'm almost scared to step in this. Because once I say this, it may change the way you feel about me. It may change the way you feel about me, and that's just what I'm going to have to live with. But I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but I once lost myself a little bit in a little game called Pokemon Go. You know the game? You know the one? That's the one where you walk around the city like you're lost, trying to catch imaginary monsters with your phone? Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. I lost myself in that game. And what's ironic about that is when that game first came out, I don't know how I got sucked into it, because when that game first came out, I used to make fun of it. I used to, full disclosure, make fun of people that played it. Not to their face, but like behind their back. That's the way you do that. I would laugh when I would see those articles like 7,000 people show up at this park on a Thursday because there's I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to say any of the characters' names, but because there's a loose Pokemon in the park and all these people are running around the park with their phones trying to catch it. And I used to laugh at stuff like that. And then one day I became one of them. I never went to the park with all the kids, but I got sucked into it. I knew where all the little dojos were around my house, and that's a Pokemon Go term. But there was a hot minute there where I spent all this time playing this game, and not just that one, right? I mean, I could stand here and rattle off a long list of games over the years that I've gotten sucked into at one time or another, a long list of them, and it's not even like there's anything wrong with the game. See, I want to be careful there. There's nothing wrong with the game. I mean, maybe some of y'all play it. I don't know, but there's nothing wrong with the game per se. But as a man, for me, to drop hours and hours on entertainment and leisure and all of this kind of stuff when I had actual responsibilities stacking up that weren't getting handled in a timely manner, but I was walking with my Pokemon every day and making sure he grew up and became stronger. But I had responsibilities that were stacking up that weren't getting done. And it wasn't just the games. I'd come home and it was the TV shows, it was the movies. I told you all this last week. I used to be all about the leisure. That was like an idol in my life was leisure. And I, so I watched the movies, I watched the TV shows, doom scrolling on my phone, like, oh, let me watch the next thing, whatever. All this content I was consuming. The problem was I wasn't really producing anything. And what I was consuming was so much more than what I was producing. Like, there was a huge imbalance there. And I'll tell you this, furthermore, I was miserable. I was walking around feeling zombified all the time, and I couldn't understand why. Kind of like the fish doesn't see the water. I couldn't see it. I was miserable. I wasn't content. I was restless, and I couldn't quite figure out why. And when I would think about doing chores, it would be almost like that sounded gross and icky. Like, why would I want to do that? Don't ask me to do that. And now, and I'm saying this like now I know everything. And I'm sitting pretty on my ivory tower. This is a lesson I'm still learning today, y'all. I'm serious. This is something I'm still trying to figure out. Let me just be clear. This is a process. I'm still actively trying to, as Paul says in Romans, to transform my mind, right? To transform my thinking, right? Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed in your thoughts. Be transformed in your mind. I'm still working on this, but I'm so much further along than I was. But the problem was I was miserable, and the reason I was miserable was because God did not design men for that kind of existence. That's not hardwired into us. That's not the existence we're wired for. It's just not. That's not how we're designed. And furthermore, work is not punishment. I used to think work was punishment. Like oh, what did I do? What did I do that now my dryer's broken. I got to go fix it. What did I do? Like work is not punishment. Remember, in the Garden of Eden, go read Genesis 1 and 2 sometime. In the Garden of Eden, before the fall, this was before the fall, when things were still relatively perfect, right? And there was no sin and there was no curse and any of that. In that society, in that environment, God gave Adam work to do. He gave him a job. He told him, be productive, man. He said, work this garden, take care of it. I've given you this, take care of it, tend to it. He even says in Genesis 1:28, he says, subdue it. Subdue it. Meaning take ownership of it and bring it into order. Own this thing like a boss. I mean, that's kind of what God is telling him, like handle it. And it gets even better. God himself gave us the model. It wasn't like he didn't give us anything to go off of. He gave us the model. God spent 6 days creating. 6 days creating, like evening to evening work. On the seventh day, he rested. You ever catch that? He worked for 6 days and then he rested. Because he was tired? No, because he was done. Because he was done. He knew what his job was. He knew what he needed to do, and then he did it. And after he did it, he stepped back on the seventh day and enjoyed it and said, look at the fruit of my labor. Look how good this is. Remember, the text says he saw all that he had made, and it was very good. He keeps stepping back to appraise his work. On the seventh day, he steps back and rests and enjoys the fruit of his labor. The problem a lot of us men run into is we try to flip that around. We'd rather play for 6 days, watch things for 6 days, do game on the living room sofa for 6 days, and then on the seventh day, begrudgingly, we might knock out a few things. Now, I know that's not a problem for all of you, but that is a problem for men all over the world right now, or at least all over this country, right? Delayed adolescence, they call it. We want to flip that around and do all our play first, and then begrudgingly do some work. No wonder so many men are wandering around listless, aimless, no sense of direction, no sense of purpose. Because another thing what God did for Adam when he gave him that assignment was it gave him purpose. He had a purpose in that garden. And man, when you're a man who knows your purpose, you're not really all that miserable. Like you're pretty solid. You know what you need to do, and you know what you're designed for. But this is the opposite of what we're designed for when we flip those around. Because one thing that really helped me was God has given all of us gardens to take care of. You're a man, God gave you a garden. Your garden might look a lot like a house on a street in a neighborhood, but he gave you a garden to take care of. And if you can just transform your mindset into thinking God has given me ownership over this to take care of it and to work it for him and for his glory. One of the things I like about the youth lesson Spence just led last time was we were talking about doing every job, doing every chore as if you were doing it for God himself. Even if you're just washing dishes, that was the exact example he gave. Even if you're just washing dishes, think to yourself, I'm going to wash this dish as if Jesus himself were going to eat off of it later. Just totally radically transform your mindset. Just transform the whole mindset when you think like that. And we know, and when we know deep down that we have tended our gardens and that we have done our job well, that's when we're the most happiest and the most satisfied. You will not change my mind on that. That's when we're the most satisfied. I appreciate the head nods. But that's when we're the happiest and the most satisfied. That's when you can go play Pokemon Go and go catch the thing and be happy and enjoy it. Right? That changes everything. That's when you can go to the park and run around with your phone and catch the I can't remember a single one of those things' names. Pikachu, that's the only one, but I can't say Pikachu because that's too generic. That doesn't prove that I know Pokemon. But that's when you can go watch the movie and really enjoy it, because you don't have that nagging sensation in the back of your head that I haven't really earned this. Be a man who produces more than he consumes, and you will be a much more happier, content man. So we've seen the character of the man, the productivity of the man. What about the faith of the man? This is the good one, y'all. I mean, they're all good. But what about the faith of the man? The third trait I want to encourage you with is be the kind of man that you would want to have praying for you. Be the guy you would want to go to if it were you that needed prayer. Be that guy. That's my charge to you. James 5:16. James 5:16 says, the prayer of a righteous man or righteous person, depending on your translation, has great power as it is working. Great passage. The prayer of a righteous man, the prayer of a righteous person, righteous man has great power. That's what James says. And we all intuitively know this. We do. We don't have to be convinced of this. And I can prove it. I can prove it really quick, really easily. How many of you have specific people you go to when you need prayer? Just throw your hand up. It's fine. You know when I need prayer, this is the person I go to, or one of the people I go to. You have specific people you choose to go to when you need prayer, don't you? And you know why? Why that person? Why him? Why her? I'll tell you why. Because you didn't choose that person randomly. I guarantee you that. No, something about that person stood out to you. Something told you, this is my guy or this is my gal. Something about either their godliness that stuck out, or their faithfulness stuck out, or their character and reputation, like we've already talked about, stuck out. The way they live their lives. Maybe you just heard them pray once or twice. And you thought to yourself as you were listening to them, she talks to God a lot. I can tell. This is somebody who talks to God regularly. I need her to talk to God for me. Yeah. And based on what you know about their character, and based on what you know about their faith, your intuition tells you that's who I'm going to. That's who I'm going to. My challenge to you, and honestly, I could kick this door wide open and say this is for everybody in here. And it is. It is. But let me just talk to the fathers for a minute. Dads, be that guy. Be him. Be the guy that you would want praying for you if it were the other way around. Be him. And you'll know it's you when people start coming to you. But be that guy. Ladies, I'll go ahead and kick the door open now. Be that person. Be that lady. Be that woman. There's no reason it can't be you. There's no reason it can't be you. Be that person. Be that person. We see in Job, we see in verses 4 and 5 of Job that his children would get together and have these parties. They would get together and have these parties. And for the record, the text does not imply in any way that they're like wild parties. They're not keggers. The text does not imply that in any way. There's no indication that they're sinning. There's no indication that they're doing anything they shouldn't be. There's no indication of that at all. But Job, who we already know is upright and blameless and fears the Lord and all of these things, and turns aside from evil, he worries about his kids. He worries about what's going on with them. And he thinks to himself, and the text tells us this, he thinks to themselves, maybe they sinned. Maybe they sinned at the party. Maybe they've just sinned since yesterday. Maybe they've even cursed God in their hearts. Which, by the way, is what sin is, by the way. Just to hate to break that to you, but when you're willfully sinning, you're cursing God, right? So maybe they've sinned. Maybe they've cursed God. And so what he would do is he would get up early in the morning. He would give himself some extra time in his day. He would get up early in the morning. This is what the text tells us. And he would go and he would make an offering to the Lord. He would make offerings and sacrifices for them, and he would pray for his kids. He would pray for his kids and intercede on their behalf. And the text tells us he did this continually. It was his habit. It was his pattern. It was his character. It's what he did. He took this very seriously. Listen, in my Mother's Day message back in May, I made the point that mothers Hopefully you remember me saying this, but I said, you mothers, just by virtue of motherhood, just by virtue of being a mother, you are playing an intricate and a special plan in God's, or shall I say, part in God's plan for mankind. I hope you remember that statement and it stuck with you. Well, it's Father's Day now, and let me just say, fathers, the same thing is true about you. The exact same thing. Just by virtue of being a father, you're playing an intricate part in God's plan for the world. You just are. You just are. It's baked into your role. And one of the parts of that, and it's a solemn charge for men, is we bear the ultimate responsibility for making sure that our homes and our families are centered on God and His Word. That's what we say. That's what we mean when we say the man is the spiritual leader of the home. Don't listen to the culture who twists that out of proportion. We bear the ultimate responsibility for making sure that our homes are centered on God and His Word, and that's one of the things we will be evaluated on when we stand before Him one day. So if you get too passive and you start leaving all that to your wife or just whatever, or just nobody in the home, see that's something we get evaluated on. But we bear the ultimate responsibility for making sure that happens. And again, verse 5 says He did it continually. What a guy, right? What a guy. In addition to everything else we've talked about him and his character and his productivity, he cared about the spiritual lives of his family, and he made constant offerings and prayers on their behalf. And this is a beautiful picture. So be the kind of man that you would want out there that morning praying for you. Be him. Be that kind of guy. But maybe you're here today thinking, hey, you know what? He's too good. That's a high standard, right? I mean, everything we just laid out, he's too good. I can't be like that. I can't do all of those things. Listen, I get it. I know better than anybody. That's been my song and dance going back years and years and years. All right, that I get it. I know it's easy to feel unprepared when we're thinking about the scope of our responsibility. It's so easy. It's so easy. If you're standing at the foot of the mountain and all you're thinking about is how big the mountain is, that mountain seems really, really big. The mountain seems really, really big. It doesn't seem so big when you're just thinking like, where's the next step? But it doesn't seem so big then. But when you're just looking at the mountain, it seems like a really, really big mountain. And just know, if you feel trapped or if you feel intimidated by that charge, by that responsibility, it's not you. That's what I want you to know. It's not you. It's not a defect or a deficiency in you. Men, the sad fact is, we just don't have a lot of places to look for examples or training or even preparation on how to be great godly men in the world today. We just don't have a lot of places to look. We don't have a lot of places to find encouragement. We certainly can't look around in the culture. We certainly can't do that. Pick your favorite TV show or streaming show. Just pick it, and I guarantee you, 99% of the time, the dad is a bumbling idiot who's there for comic relief. He serves no practical purpose in his family. He's in the background. Everybody else runs over him all the time. 99% of the time, that's your dad. If not, he's some kind of narcissist who's domineering. But that's your options, basically, on TV. But it's not just what we're shown, it's also what we're told. It's the message that is ingrained into us and shot into us every day of our lives, basically, just out in the world, out in the culture. We have to be strong, but not too strong, or that's toxic, right? Be strong, but don't go too far. We have to be helpful, but not too helpful. That's chauvinistic. Yeah. Don't be scared to show your emotions. Be emotional, but not too emotional, or you're just a big baby. How many of you have ever made the mistake of showing a little bit of emotion to somebody, letting them know a little something that hurt you one time, and they're like, "Oh, you poor baby," right? I mean, we live in this, and that's why so many men feel trapped, because we live with this tension 24/7. We're pushed to go, but not too far. Go, but don't go too far. That's a hard place to live. That's a hard place to be. And the way out of it, This is what I learned. The way out of it is stop looking for answers where there are no answers to be found. So that's your first problem. Like literally, the culture doesn't know the first thing about what makes a great man. It just doesn't. So if that's where you're looking, forget it. Because one of Satan's favorite tactics, and he does this all the time, is to redefine things that God has already defined. One of his favorite things to do. And that's why the cultural definition of manhood is so jacked up. Because he twisted that definition a long time ago. He tried to redefine, he did redefine what God had already defined. So don't look around, look up. Don't look around, don't look at the TV, don't look at the culture, don't look at what your friends down the street are doing. Look up. Look up. And remember this, you are already the son of the most perfect Father. You are the son of the most perfect Father. You have the most perfect Father already in heaven. And he will instruct you. He will do it. He will instruct you on how to be a great man and a great father. He will give you that. Let him teach you. Let him do it. Look to him for training on godliness. Look to him for that. Look around his church for examples of godliness. You'll find it here way more than you'll find it out there. Look to him for training on godliness. Look around his church for examples of godliness. Look to his word for instructions on godliness. That's where we look. Learn from the examples of guys like Job. Guys that would get up early just to go pray for his family as he's turning aside from evil. Pay attention to how Paul instructs Timothy in the New Testament, even though they're not even really biologically related. But Paul's a father figure to Timothy. Pay attention to how Paul interferes, instructs, and intercedes for Timothy. Pay attention to that. Be inspired. Be inspired when Joshua stands up in front of the entire nation of Israel. The entire nation of Israel assembled, every eye on him. In Joshua 24:15. Every eye on him. And he says, choose this day who you will serve. Whether those old gods, the ones you used to follow, who led you astray back then, or those false gods that everybody's running to today, who are fake and who are false. You choose, he says. Choose for yourself. But he says, but as for me and my house, what's the next line? We will serve the Lord. Yeah, baby. We will serve the Lord. And you know, Joshua, he really nailed that one. He really did. Because that's it right there. He said the magic word, choose. Choose this day. Because that's really what it all comes down to for us. That's really what it all comes down to is choices. You can't change your whole personality overnight. At least most of us can't. But every day we make about 1,000 little choices. And those choices add up. And those choices eventually make up our character. We make 1,000 little choices every day. And those determine what kind of men we're going to be, is those choices. Are we going to walk blameless? Are we going to fear God? Are we going to turn away from evil? Are we going to be the kind of men we would want our daughters to marry? Are we going to be the kind of men who produce more than we consume? Are we going to be the kind of men that we would want to have praying for us? Well, we make choices every day. Those are the big choices, but we make choices every day that answer those questions. There's no insignificant choice. There's no choice you make is insignificant. I learned that laying on my sofa playing Pokemon Go. This is not an insignificant choice. What I'm doing right now at 5:35 p.m. in the afternoon is not insignificant. There just aren't any insignificant choices. And don't forget also, we have the Holy Spirit helping to oversee this whole process. Don't forget him. He's in this with us. He's in this with us, and he wants us to succeed at being godly men. Don't forget that. We've got him overseeing the whole process and strengthening and empowering us to do it. He hasn't left us alone. He hasn't left us alone. We've got this. We've got this. And if you have trouble, if you have problems, we also have each other. We have this church. We have the family of God. We help disciple each other. We help encourage each other. So, yeah, it's a big task, but it's a beautiful task. And when we get to the end of it, just like Kelly and I have been, every night when I come home from work for the last week and a half, we've been laying flooring in our house. And every night we see that floor just crawl across the house a little further and a little further and a little further. And she's such a beast. I came home from work the other day and it was done. And I lay my head on the pillow every night like, this is so much better. I feel so much more fulfilled knowing we got something done. We got something accomplished. Well, imagine getting to the end of your life and laying your head on that pillow for the last time, the metaphorical pillow, and having that exact same feeling about the whole day that made up your life. Did it. And then you get to close your eyes for that last time, and then you get to see Jesus, this man who died for you, this man who bled, suffered, and died for you. And you lock eyes with him for the first time you ever look into his eyes, y'all. It's the first time. And you're not tempted to look down in shame because of all the things you could have done. You look right at him, and the first thing he says is, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful." I just got chills everywhere. You can get chills. Happy Father's Day. God bless you. Go forth and barbecue. Let's pray.